All right, so let's get started. Welcome to the Inclusion Stories Fest 2022. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm very happy to tell you that the Inclusion Stories Fest is a storytelling festival that encourages all children to come and tell their stories and just be heard. And this movement is being powered by Not That Different, which is India's first children-led movement to speak about neurodiversity and understand their friends better. I'm very happy to tell you that this fest is being done with our lovely partners, some with stories and beyond. We have the Wiki Diversity and Inclusion Panel, Nai Disha, Early Childhood Association, Association for Primary Education and Research, and Club Youngistan. And of course, nothing here is possible without the love and support of all of our youngsters of Bookosmian. They're all spread out across 145 plus global locations. And I'm just so glad that they support us in all of the initiatives that we do. And support is not the right word. I think the word is lead. And why is that? I'll just welcome Nidhi Mishra. She's the CEO and the founder of Bookosmian. She took a pivot from banking and went on to found Bookosmian, which is now India's #1 publishing platform for kids. Nidhi, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Archana. I know everything is led by kids, by young people, so I won't speak for more than a minute. But very, very happy that this session is happening as part of our Inclusion Fest. Writing for inclusion in particular is something I think that Archana, me, and the larger team here have lived through the challenges that we faced when we came out with our comic book. There's always, that doubt. Is it too much information? Is it still fun for a reader? Then we had another dilemma about, trying to point out that each story of someone who's disabled or living with a neurodiverse condition is different. So I know that our experience is very lived, I think, Archana, in terms of how stories should be written. We have a beautiful everyday story coming up by neurodiverse kids themselves, and I think nothing better than that. We are publishing one such every day where they tell the stories, and we were just discussing how much easier it is when you see it. And it's not like a brochure, not an information booklet. When you see it, when you hear someone else tell the story, it just comes in so well. So very, very excited for this particular session. And I can see we have some amazing Bookosmians here who've been writing for us regularly. We publish over 1,000 young writers every year. We've done so for 3,000 plus kids so far. So excited and totally paving the way for these young guys to take over now. Thanks, Archana.
Thanks, Nidhi, for setting the tone for today's event. So welcome to Writing Stories on Inclusion. We have a very, very, very special guest today, and I'm so eager to get it started and listen more from her. But I just want to tell you a little background on why we did this. So all of you youngsters here at Bookosmian love to read. Am I right? That is why we all have that common thing between us. Bookosmian means the smell of books, and how much we love that, isn't it? And I also know that because you read so much, you also write your own stories. And I've seen so many times when you write your characters and your stories, you go into so many different worlds, isn't it? So what is it to write stories of people who are a little bit different from us? So how can we write a good story in which we can capture the right emotions, in which we can capture the right words? All of that and more is what we will discuss with the amazing Lavanya Karthik. Welcome, Lavanya.
Hi, good evening. Very, very delighted to be part of this festival. And I'm really looking forward to interacting with your young readers.
Thank you, Lavanya. Well, Lavanya here is an award-winning author and illustrator, but I know I don't have to tell you because all of you are fans of her writing. And I know all of us have been deep into her Dreamers series, and we are loving the beautiful books that are coming out of there. She's an award-winning Indian author and illustrator of children's books, especially the Ninja Nani series, how much we enjoy those set of books. She's written wonderful books like A Walk with Thambi, another excellent book that we often speak about here, and a lot of other books. I'm not going to reveal them because our youngsters have all picked up their books and they're all going to talk about it. But she's been published by Pratham, by Scholastic, by Mango, by Pearson, Tulika Books, Westland, Culprich, and Duckbill. Lots and lots and lots of books, lots of illustrations, lots of stories. This is our chance to pick Lavanya's brain and get out all the writing secrets. So let's not leave any stone unturned. All right. Okay. Let me start then with Pearl Doshi. Pearl is 12 and she's logging in today from Sharjah. Pearl loves to play the guitar and keyboard. She does calligraphy. She does painting, she does quilling, she writes poems, she writes stories, and don't mess with her because she has a black belt in karate. All right. Welcome, Pearl.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead, Pearl. Tell us what book of Lavanya's would you like to speak about today?
I would like to speak about the book, What Does Anu See? So I feel that this book is really, why I chose this book is because it is an amazing book, first of all. And as a child, from my perspective, we children have a natural sense of curiosity and we are keen observers. To us, the world is filled with abundance of sights to see, smell, hear, taste, and touch, our five senses. And the way in the book all our surroundings are described is just mesmerizing. I feel like it helps to enhance the way we look at things, and it makes us realize that even the smallest of stuff around us has so much of vast past or has so much of content in it. Lastly, I would like to mention the attention to detail that is there in each and every aspect of the story. It is so well described and perfect, and it's just perfect. And it is really well thought out story, and it's just amazing. I can't stop reading it. So overall, the book was just amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pearl. I'm delighted that you like the book so much.
Pearl, tell us if you have a question for Lavanya about writing.
Yes. Okay. So I do have a question. So Lavanya ma'am, how do you think that a writer can channel his or her emotions in a book or story so that their emotions are neither too exposed nor are they too enclosed?
That's an interesting question. I think, well, there are different ways. But I think it really depends on the kind of characters that you create and the experiences you put your characters through. I think that is perhaps the best way to, show their emotions, show how they react to certain situations or, certain things that happen to them. And not too enclosed and not too exposed. Now that's a very cryptic point. Would you like to tell, just elaborate on that a bit?
I mean, I've read a lot of books in my life. Recently, I read one of the books where it was just too sappy. It was too much of emotion, and the emotions were all over the place. And kind of, I didn't enjoy reading that book. And then there was one more book that I read before that had no excitement in it. It was just bland and it was just really bad. So like where to get the middle point where you have neither of too much?
It takes a lifetime of practice. I think we are all as writers or as artists or as cooks, we're all trying to create that perfect, cake or book or piece of art. So I think it's a lifetime journey to find that perfect point. And I myself, I'm on that journey. I think I'm just beginning. And, that's a fascinating question, but I think that it will change for each one of us. And some people love sappy books. Sometimes you want a book which makes you laugh and makes you cry or is full of silly jokes. So perhaps each book finds its reader. And each writer finds their pace at some point.
Thank you so much.
Such a fascinating question, Lavanya.
It is.
I think I particularly could, relate with the question, especially in this context when we're talking of inclusion stories, because very often stories which are written on this theme are done so, and we ourselves have partnered with so many of special needs moms who are activists. So they do carry a lot of lived experience, but then there's also a lot of emotion there, and things they faced in their life. So that does pour out. Which is where for us we had to play the balancing act. I remember that we got someone like us who has no exposure, who's not living with someone with neurodiversity. We took all the inputs from moms who were raising these kids, but we did eventually go with an author who has no exposure to it directly, like Archana did. So I get the question, Pearl, as well. I totally get it. I think it's a very fine balance, and like Lavanya said, you have to work hard to strike it.
Lavanya,
Thanks for that question, though. Yeah.
Lavanya, you spoke of a lifetime's worth of learning. So tell us about how you started, getting into this whole world of writing and illustrating stories. Did you also start when their age, about 9, 10, 11? Did you also
Yes,
start?
absolutely. By the time I was 8, I knew I was going to be a writer. But as so often happens, your parents convince you that you must, have more realistic dreams. And so, of course, like everybody in my generation, I went on to do a professional course, and then I practiced. But at some point, I realized that, the old love for writing and drawing, I used to doodle all the time. That old love came back. And I figured that, now was the time to see if I could, create the books that I was constantly thinking of. So I did that. I did just that. I think it's been about 10 years now that I have been writing and illustrating. And absolutely, no regrets. I'm very happy that I did that. And at the same time, I must say that though one has, I think there's a tendency to say that, there's so much time that got wasted because you did other things. But the time is never wasted because you are experiencing life. You are going through all kinds of happy and all different kinds of experiences, and you are growing, you're learning. So I think in all those years before I began writing, I would like to think of it as a time of research. I was sort of getting ready to write.
That's amazing. I think all of us should write it down. Childhood is a time of research for what you're going to do in the future. I love that.
Absolutely.
All right, great motto for us for this event.
Well, all of life, honestly, not childhood at all, just all of life. Every day is it's like a lab experiment. Something or the other is going on. So you need to observe from a distance what's happening to you.
That's amazing. All right, and speaking of something amazing, we have now Siona Guha, who is 10, and she joins us from Hyderabad. Siona loves her C's. The C's are crafting, coding, coloring, and cartoons. She loves to play badminton and football, and she's still deciding if she wants to be a detective or an archaeologist. She'll let us know when she has come to a decision. Welcome, Siona. Have you made the decision?
No.
That's wonderful.
Now I've changed a lot of other things.
Oh, you have more options to add, that means.
And so I'm going to be talking about this book, When Adil Speaks Words Dance. So I really liked how in this book, how the author brought out that the boy who's like narrating the story, unlike in a lot of other stories where people feel down on the people who are different, and the people who are different than us, people look down on and they don't want to be friends. But the way this narrator is talking, we can understand that the boy wants to be friends with Adil, not go away from him. So that's we can. It also brings out how much effort he's trying to put in making sure that Adil can understand him and all. And like many times I've seen these like when you say biographies of people with differences and all, like Helen Keller, Stephen Hawking, they put a lot of they obsess a lot on the disability, and half of the time you can just remember their name and the disability, not the thing they've done, and that doesn't bring it equal. But this book really took that out. So yeah. I also have one question for the author. When interacting, like how can we address these group of people with differences? We can't call them they have disabilities, but how do we address them in books and when we are generally talking?
I think first and foremost, let's just tell ourselves that there is no us and them. It is all us. We are all people with, we are all on a spectrum of some kind. We all have our skills, we have abilities, and we all have things that we aren't so good at. So we all have disabilities of some kind. So let's start perhaps by thinking that everyone's the same, and we need to discover ways to communicate, to extend our, interest in someone else, to make friends, and to want to listen to their stories, to find out who they are and what they like. I think making friends is very, very simple. You know how quickly you can make friends in school, right? In recess time, at canteen, or on the football field. So I think it's just a question of wanting to know someone a little more, and then you usually will find a way to make friends. So let's just think of everyone has things that make us the same, and some things that make us different. So fine. The clue is just since you're going to be a detective, so let's use the word clue. So the clue you need to find is a way to begin our conversation and find out more about them. And usually you'll find that it's really, really simple.
Okay, and I have one more question. It's many times, once in my school, I had this classmate who was a little differently abled, as he couldn't walk properly, he couldn't write properly. So many times, he had some special arrangement made, so he didn't have to have much trouble going from the cafeteria to our classroom, which was on the second floor, like that. But sometimes I felt like he may not like the way the people were giving attention to him, how we all come to help him. So when you write your books, and like if you write your books and someone who is differently able, maybe not like the character in your book, but still differently able, and he or she somehow learns to understand the story, how do you make sure there's no connection, like that person doesn't feel bad about themselves, because the books don't want to make them feel bad, but like when you read it, how do you make sure they don't feel bad?
I think what one can do is put oneself in the place of the character and see how would you react to certain actions. Perhaps that would be the simplest way when you're writing. Just put yourself in the place of that character and ask yourself, I mean, if this were to happen to me, how would I feel? And perhaps that's the best way to go about your story. Yeah. And in terms of the first half, when you talked about the boy in your school who may not like the attention, perhaps the simplest thing was before you offer help to ask, do you want me to help you? Would you like me to help you? Or even, how would you like me to help you? Maybe a question like that would make it easier for him to tell you what he needs or doesn't need, instead of us assuming this is what he needs. Okay. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a beautiful question, Siona. And thank you for sharing your experiences as well. All of these shared experiences are what makes life richer. So thank you, and I really appreciate you for sharing that. Lavanya, what Siona spoke also brought an interesting question to mind, which we had discussed sometime back in last week's discussion when we had a roundtable. Mm-hmm. When we speak of disability, a lot of times we're only thinking physical disability. Sure. But disability is also invisible. If you look at someone on, say, someone with dyslexia or dyspraxia, for example, it is invisible. So how do you talk about that in your books when you tell children about the invisible disability as well? How do you write that?
To be honest, I haven't yet. It's an ongoing research that I have, but it's a big question mark in the air. But yes, I think the whole point is not to put the disability in the center as the central focus. Look at the fact that they're all children first, and children they are same in the way that they would like to enjoy themselves, have some fun, make friends, play games, play pranks. And in fact, my books are essentially about that. It's about the playground more than about a disability or in some way that the child is differently able. I think the point is to find those common experiences that we all have as not just as children, as people.
Absolutely, and that actually perfectly summarizes what our entire movement is all about, where we are saying that yes, there may be differences, but we're not all that different. We all have these similarities that we can focus on and learn to enjoy all of our uniqueness better. So thank you for that. I'm very happy to now bring in Diksha Shashikumar, and she joins us from Chennai. Hi, Diksha.
Hi, ma'am. I'm going to talk about Meal on Wheels. I enjoyed this book thoroughly. I loved how the book explains how inclusiveness doesn't change anything. It just makes them more unique. Not only was that the reason I chose this book, but I picked it because of the illustration. The way it was illustrated brought me so much joy. Okay, before I ask you the questions, I just wanted to tell you that I enjoyed this picture book. It has been such a long time since I've read these.
Thank you, and I'll convey your comments on the illustration to Habib, who drew the illustrations. I'll definitely tell him how much you enjoyed them.
Okay, I'm a voracious reader. In almost all the books, the hero has no flaws. He or she always saves the world, rescues people in trouble, or teaches a moral. From Harry Potter to RRR, heroes are larger than life. What made you base your main character on Neil?
Well, I wanted to talk about, as I said, I was looking at the very small experiences that we cherish in our lives, and in this case, it was about the bond between two brothers. And I just, it began with this idea of this one boy being afraid of lots of things, and depending on his older brother to help him be less afraid. So it began with that, and it very slowly evolved into a story where I had I wanted the older brother to be not your conventional big brother. I just wanted to show that a child in a wheelchair doesn't have to be viewed at once. It's not by default the child that needs help or needs to be saved. He can be a hero too. So it's a very, very small aspect. It began with showing the bond between these two brothers, and it slowly developed into a story about not really disabilities, more about the power of the imagination to help us overcome fears. And
Okay, my second question is, my mother always says that kids are merciless, especially tweens. Why are we ready to ignore anyone who's not normal according to us? Can literature moralize these young readers?
Should young readers need moralizing? I don't get it. But and also, are children merciless? I don't think so. I think I know lots of children who are by nature very kind, very empathetic. They naturally go out to help people. So I wouldn't call young readers or young children merciless at all. I think we all have a great empathy within us that we just need to allow it out. I think sometimes if there are social pressures that make it easier for us to pretend to be, in a certain way, or to treat someone as different just because of a peer group. But I think inside we all know, how we all know what it feels like when someone is kind to us, and we definitely have the capacity to show the same kindness and the same empathy. I think I'm rambling from your basic question, but no, children are not merciless. I think they are some of the kindest, nicest people I know. And another thing I like to show, I know there are lots of books which always have this idea of this bully who's creating trouble for children, and there's this whole narrative that spirals out from that. But I like to show worlds, like if you look at Walk with Tambi or even Adil. I like to show a world where there are no bullies, where children are capable of kindness and tolerance and patience. And I really like showing that in my books.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Diksha. And just to tell you a little bit more about Diksha, she's 11 from Chennai. She's an avid reader. She loves to write short stories and poems. And she has a YouTube channel where she reviews books, shares science experiments, and fileless cooking videos. We should definitely check that out. Thank you so much for your questions and your observations. And thank you, Lavanya, for those wonderful answers. All right. And now off to Kolkata again, where we have Prisha Moitra, who joins us. Hi, Prisha.
Hello everyone. Lavanya ma'am, I would like to ask you and talk about the book, What Does Anu See? So after reading your short and quite delightful book, I felt that it had a deeper thought and meaning to it. I love how you beautifully weave the lines that expressed what Anu's curious mind saw, and what the patterns that she saw in everything around her. At times, while reading the lines, I even paused to appreciate the innocence in them. So I would like to ask you if you have ever known someone like Anu in your life who inspired you to write this book.
Oh, yes, I think every child I've ever met, for sure. And sometimes some of these children grow up into adults who do not lose that curiosity. In fact, I write a series called Dreamers, which in some ways is precisely about people like that who never lose their fascination with something. There's a book about Satyajit Ray, whose journey towards making cinema started with his fascination with light. And it never went away. He was constantly exploring light and shadow throughout his life. There is Dr. Janaki Ammar, who went on to who had a deep love for plants as a child, and it went on to become her life's calling. She had animals. She used to have a pet squirrel. She actually smuggled a little squirrel from India all the way to the UK when she traveled to work in a laboratory there. She smuggled a little squirrel in her sari, and it stayed with her in her laboratory for several years. So when you read these nuggets, you realize that there are people like this all around you. But definitely children. I had my daughter, who is now in college. It has been a great privilege to watch her growing up and be part of that experience of her growing up, meeting her friends, watching them interact. So yes, lots and lots of people have inspired my books.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Prisha. Prisha, of course, is a prolific writer for us. She aspires to become an artist when she grows up. She loves literature, science, and performing arts, reads books, loves chess, long walks, and her only wish is to get the Harry Potter invisibility cloak so that she can read books past her bedtime. Don't we all wish that? All right. Thank you, Prisha. I believe Pearl has another question, so I'll give it to you, Pearl.
Yes, thank you so much. When you talked about, other disabilities, a question popped up in my mind that, Lavanya ma'am, do you think depression or anxiety is a disability? If yes, then how would you want your characters in a book that, suppose, for example, you would write to react to such a disability?
Well, actually, yes, I think mental, yes, depression is definitely, I would say it is a disability because of the way it affects you. It makes it very difficult for, a person to just engage in day-to-day activities. That's a very, very, very good question, actually. I mean, but yes, I agree, it is. Even things, I mean, think of other things. Think of fear. Who's afraid of cockroaches? Who's afraid of cockroaches here? Yeah. So have you ever had a situation where you put on a light and there's a cockroach in the room and you are frozen because you can't go in? It's happened to me too. So just imagine that basic fear. Fear itself feels like a disability, and there are lots of things that freeze you up like that. So I would say definitely that disability, mental health are uh, are they are definitely things. At the same time, honestly, these are very universal concerns, and anxiety can hit all of us. I mean, we've all had these moments of bad thoughts and insecurity at some point or the other. So we all go through them. So perhaps that's the other chord here, that some of these are universal experiences of different kinds or different levels. And how would I show these in books? I think, again, it is not a subject I've ever dealt with, but fascinating question, which I will now think about. But yes, I would like to see a book deal with these issues realistically and with empathy and with humor. I think humor is very, very important in a book. I mean, if you've noticed, all my books are funny. I don't write particularly sad books. And I think humor is the quickest way to make friends, to connect people, to engage a child in, or even a grown up into a book. And so humor, empathy, kindness.
I'm very glad, Pearl, you asked that question, because it's very, very relevant, especially to young people, to kids and adolescents, because 1 in 7 adolescents suffer from a mental health issue. It could be anxiety, depression, and even worse of stats are that 50% of those issues that are chronic in adults have taken root before age 14. So we at Bookosmian actually run in the first podcast on mental health by young people like you guys, coming and talking about it. And we have psychologists and psychiatrists from India who address it. But more importantly, it was something that started when young people, not just from the metros, and there are so many stereotypes that get busted, when you get into something like this. Because earlier we thought, oh, it's so first world to say, oh, I have anxiety, it must be only in the metros. And then we started seeing these entries from all the small towns. And we realized that we need to do something beyond just publishing them. So that's where this whole intervention, and that's what Dr. Kavita Arora, who's the lead psychiatrist at Children's First, she said, you need these common conversations. It could be through books, it could be through podcasts, because we never have enough therapists for a country the size of India, but we need these community interventions. So if a book comes out where a young adult has those issues, grapples with them, understands it's not isolating, too many of us suffer from them as well, that would be fantastic. So thanks for raising that question. It's very, very relevant today more than any other time.
That's great that you have a podcast, because I think the biggest, not the solution, but the first step towards recovery or addressing an issue is normalizing conversation.
Absolutely.
To give people a space to express themselves and to openly be able to talk about their fears
And according to the psychiatrists, a lot of the impact it would have gets addressed by just speaking to a community where others are also sharing. So they are not very clinical. All the issues are not clinical. So it's like a pyramid, but a very large lot gets addressed. We have this podcast. It's on Audible. Fantastic teams like you guys run it for us. And we've learned a lot more about opening up, listening to these guys. Right, I can see Samridha has raised her hand. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question for Lavanya, ma'am. Ma'am, once I had read a storybook of Ruskin Bond, the funny cider, and I really enjoyed the story. And one question always pops up in my mind, that I wonder how one writes a story which attracts our attention within the characters.
No, I always say this, that the best way to write a story is to write the story that you would enjoy. So make yourself the reader and write the story that you will enjoy. And that is the most authentic, most sincere way to, write a good story, I feel. Because we cannot expect everybody to have our sense of humor or our interest in, murder mysteries or detectives or like our plots. Like someone said, the book was too sappy. But I know I have friends who love sappy, really, really emotional books that make me roll my eyes and say, oh God, what is this? So the best way to write a good story is to write a story that you will enjoy. And I think the that is perhaps all the most successful authors will tell you that. They will say that this is a story. This is my story. This is a story that I would like to jump into and be part of. And it always, it's sort of, you will always find your readers that way.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Samrit.
Thank you, Samrita, for that question. We now go to Navneer Bhattacharya, who's joined us from Kolkata. Hi, Navneer. Navneer, are you there? All right, some tech issue, I think. And while we get Navneer back, Lavanya, you spoke about how stories make you happy, and we would love for you to give us a prompt for our young readers and writers of Bookosmian. Tell us a prompt that you would like our youngsters at Bookosmian work for, because we would love for them to take that idea forward. Is there a story that you will ask them to work for?
When you say prompt, do you want like a sentence or just a single word? What do you think it works?
Whatever works for you. A sentence or a word, an idea, anything that you'd like.
Well, would spooky help? Is spooky a good prompt?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think spooky, because that's my favorite kind of book. So spooky popped into my head at once.
All right, so there you go. We have a word prompt from Lavanya, and the word is spooky. So all of you go ahead and work on it, and definitely we'll be sharing all of those stories with Lavanya as well. It should be wonderful to see how these youngsters come up with all of these ideas. All right. I believe Navneer is actually very enthusiastic. He's read a book. He's very excited to join in, but I think some tech issues. I'll probably share a little bit about what he sent us. So Navneer actually, he has read the book. I'll just tell you. It's called Too Big, Too Small, and he found it to be a delightful little book. So he spoke about how, the importance of, or the role of family that helps you write your books. This book is about a family and all the things people say to you. So he wanted to talk to you about that. What is the role of a family in helping you become a good writer?
Actually, yes, and it also helps you expand the meaning of the word family. I think that there's an entire group of people, not just your, father, mother, brother. They, of course, are helping you or inspiring your stories. Perhaps you base some of your characters on them, of course. But there is a wider family that I always think of. For instance, in my case, it is my neighbors. It is friends of mine who, read my books and then tell me things about them. Or they share other authors. They share little stories that they think I would be interested in. And there's the next step, the great wider world. People, I meet children who have read my books, like right now, and I'm learning from you. I've already learned so much from the questions that you've asked me, because you've got me thinking about so many aspects of questions, so many aspects of you asked me about mental health. We talked about so many issues, and I'm now, it's going to spark off in my head at some point, and maybe inspire my next story. And yeah, I think family is extremely important. I think it is the fundamental group that keeps you going, supports you, and sometimes fights with you, of course. But at the end of the day, you can't work without them. You can't be an island and be on yourself, be by yourself. And with every interaction with other people, you are growing yourself all the time. Like I said, life, it's the greatest adventure, and life is that great experiment. It's that you are looking, you're watching, and that is what's inspiring your writing. All the greatest books are about, they're not about fantasies, dragons, unicorns, but when you look closer, they're about what? They're about how to be a better person, how to make friends, how to behave at times of danger, how to become a hero. Or, that's what every story is addressing. The power of communication, friendship, the power of love, which is central to Harry Potter, that all of you love. It's about love. And those are such universal ideas. And where else do you learn them except with your family and your greater family, your friends, your relatives, the people on the bus that you travel on every day. Everyone finally becomes, the known faces, the confidants. Everyone gathers into this big family and they're all helping you on your journey in writing.
What a lovely message, Lavanya. Thank you so much for that. We now come to the end of this most wonderful session that we've had with Lavanya and all of our youngsters, all of you with such wonderful questions. Thank you so much for joining us. Before I end, I'll just ask Nidhi to probably close it out with a few words. Once again, a very big thank you to all of you for coming in today and making our Inclusive Stories Fest very, very special indeed.
Thank you to all the amazing questions that poured in. And it was amazing to see that these questions popped up in your mind while reading the books, because while writing the neurodiversity comic that we came out with, we faced so many of these while doing it. So it's fantastic. We are very excited to have our young Bookosmians share and write their thoughts on this festival celebrating neurodiversity. There's a lot we are going to learn. I'm very glad for all the tips they've got from Lavanya, who's been writing on inclusion for a while. Because like any other book, I think there's a lot of research which needs to go, especially on a topic like this, which is which affects people, which tells them how you see them. So there is just so much to learn. I loved Siona's question on labels. What is the right thing to refer to when you refer to a group? What are the right words? There are raging debates out there about whether it would be disability. Is it a disease? Is it a special? Should you call someone specially abled? So many things about it. And I think I'm just very glad that after listening to everything discussed here, especially the inputs from Lavanya about how they, let's just drop the us and them kind of a narrative and probably be a little more at peace with it and not very worried about what we are writing. How could it offend? If you speak from your heart, probably it will come out right. So I'm very excited for all the entries we are going to get. We are going to have a book published of young people talking about neurodiversity, and a favorite topic from the parent community in the neurodiverse world is everyday inclusion. What is that one thing you're going to do, having heard, having watched, having written, read, one thing that you could do to be more inclusive? At school, it could be in your apartments, when you go down to play in your common play areas. So hopefully this session is going to be like one gold mine of tips, because we've heard it from Lavanya herself, and she has been writing so many books on inclusion. Lavanya, if I could ask before I close, what is your inspiration in writing about inclusion of various forms? As we know, it's not just a particular, it's not just say visual or sight or physical disability. Is there something that drives you to pick up this particular theme, otherwise which would be dreary to most authors?
Well, actually, while I have written several books that address inclusion, each book has been a different story. For instance, with When Adil Speaks, it began with an interest in sign language and wanting to, looking at how people with hearing, hearing impairment, how they communicate. And that gradually developed into a story which became not about hearing loss at all. It became a very different story about communication, which is a universal, a problem, or it's a universal, something we all grapple with, how to communicate. So it became a larger story. And again, with Walk with Tambi, I just wanted to talk about a small town and, the interaction between children. And it very, very naturally became a story about a child who was blind, but showing that did not matter. And how, you working very easily with friends, with a dog. And of course, if you've read the book, you realize that the story is really more about the dog than, without giving away the ending. there is more to it than just a very simple story where there's a child who has a very wholesome experience, experiencing the world despite not being able to see, and the kind of experiences he has. Looking at it through the lens of this one day when everything seems to be going wrong.
Right.
So rather than one very, rather than a universe or one kind of inspiration, I think each story begins very differently, and
very organic is what I'm hearing.
Each of these
right?
grow very, very differently. So I wouldn't be able to say there's one thing.
No, that's fantastic. It's amazing the work you're doing. We love these sessions we have with the authors because I think we're very, very fascinated with this category of people. They write amazing books, they research so well, and they're yet very down to earth. So I'm very grateful for every author who's visited us, and today's yet another example of that. Thank you so much. Lavanya, if there's anything you want to say, I'm happy for you to just go ahead and share anything.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this session, and everybody keep writing. And there are going to be bad days for sure. There'll be days when you feel like the writing is really going badly. It's not going well. It doesn't matter. Take a break. Go do something else. But don't give up. Don't give up. Keep writing.
That's fantastic. All right. Thank you so much, Lavanya. Thank you all of you Bookosmians for joining in, for reading the book so well, coming prepared with your questions. It has been wonderful. I'm waiting to hear and waiting for you to send in your entries about how you're feeling in this month-long festival, which has introduced us to the idea of diversity. Right. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Archana, for running this. Bye, Lavanya.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Nidhi. Bye, Archana. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.